Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
The courthouse steps felt cold beneath Leah's feet as she clutched the divorce papers, their crisp edges cutting through the October air like accusations. 15 years. 15 years of marriage reduced to signatures and legal jargon. At 42, she stood there feeling both ancient and newborn, like a snake that had just shed its skin but wasn't quite sure what creature lay beneath. The autumn wind carried the scent of dying leaves and new possibilities, though Leah couldn't distinguish between the two just yet. She had always been practical, methodical, traits that served her well in her work, inspecting bridges, but had somehow failed her in inspecting her own life. Her marriage to David hadn't been terrible, mind you. It had been adequate, like a bridge that met all safety requirements but lacked any architectural beauty, functional, forgettable. They had moved through their days like two parallel lines, never quite touching, never quite diverging. I feel like I'm living with a roommate, David had said during their last real conversation, his words echoing in the kitchen where they'd shared countless silent dinners. We're both good people, Leah, but we're not right for each other. He wasn't wrong. There had been no passion, no fire, no moment when she looked at him and felt her heart skip like a stone across water. She had attributed this to maturity, to the natural settling that comes with age. But standing there on those courthouse steps, divorce papers trembling in her hands, she wondered if perhaps she had been wrong about more than just their compatibility. 3 weeks later, Leah found herself standing beneath the Riverside Bridge at dawn, her hard hat slightly askew, her safety vest bright yellow against the gray morning mist. This had always been her sanctuary, the world of steel and concrete, of measurements and calculations that made sense in ways that human relationships never seemed to. She was examining stress fractures in the support beams when she heard footsteps echoing across the metal walkway above. A figure emerged from the fog like something out of a dream, tall, confident, carrying herself with the easy grace of someone comfortable in her own skin. "You must be Leah Morrison," the woman called down, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed to chase away the morning chill. "I'm Hannah Chen, the structural engineer assigned to this project." Hannah descended the ladder with practiced ease, and as she drew closer, Leah felt something shift in her chest, a flutter she hadn't experienced in, well, perhaps ever. Hannah was beautiful, certainly, with her dark hair pulled back in, a practical ponytail and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to see everything, but it was more than beauty. There was an energy about her, a presence that made the air itself seem more alive. "I've reviewed your preliminary reports," Hannah continued, setting down her equipment bag. "Your attention to detail is impressive. Most inspectors miss the microfractures you've documented here." Leah felt heat rise to her cheeks at the compliment. "I thank you. I believe in being thorough." Hannah smiled, and Leah noticed how her eyes crinkled at the corners. "Good. I have a feeling we're going to work well together." As they began their inspection, moving from beam to beam, Leah found herself stealing glances at Hannah's hands as they pointed out structural concerns. They were elegant hands, she thought, then immediately wondered why she was noticing such things. "Tell me something," Hannah said 3 hours later as they sat in the small diner across from the bridge, steam rising from their coffee cups like morning prayers. "What made you choose bridge inspection? It's not exactly a common career path for women." Leah wrapped her hands around her mug, finding comfort in its warmth. "I suppose I've always been drawn to things that endure. Bridges connect places, they bring people together across impossible distances. And they're honest, they either hold or they don't. There's no pretending with structural integrity." Hannah nodded thoughtfully. "Unlike relationships." The words hung in the air between them, and Leah felt exposed, as if Hannah had somehow glimpsed the divorce papers still tucked in her car's glove compartment. "I'm sorry," Hannah said quickly. "That was presumptuous. I don't know anything about your personal life." "No, You're not wrong," Leah admitted. "I just finalized my divorce last month. 15 years, and it turns out we were both just going through the motions." Hannah's expression softened. "That must have been difficult." "The strange thing is, it wasn't. Not really. The hardest part was admitting that I felt relieved." Leah surprised herself with this honesty. She hadn't even told her sister about the relief. "Sometimes, Hannah," said gently, "the end of one thing is just the beginning of something else." Their eyes met across the table, and Leah felt that flutter again, stronger this time. She looked away quickly, focusing on her coffee, wondering why a simple conversation with a colleague felt so charged with possibility. Over the following weeks, Leah and Hannah fell into an easy rhythm. They would meet at various bridges around the city, spend their days in productive collaboration, and often end up sharing meals and conversation. Leah found herself looking forward to these moments with an intensity that both thrilled and confused her. Hannah was brilliant, funny, and surprisingly vulnerable when she talked about her own past, a failed relationship with a woman named Sarah, the challenges of being out in a predominantly male profession, the loneliness of moving to a new city where she knew no one. Wait, Leah had said when Hannah mentioned Sarah casually during one of their dinners. You're gay, yes, Hannah replied matter-of-factly, cutting into her salmon. Has been since I figured out what the word meant. Is that a problem? Leah shook her head quickly. No, of course not. I've never really known anyone who was open about it. Hannah raised an eyebrow. Really? In this day and age? My ex-husband and I moved in fairly conservative circles, Leah explained, feeling foolish. I'm probably more sheltered than I realized. Well, Hannah said with a smile that made Leah's pulse quicken, consider your education officially beginning. It was during their inspection of the old railway bridge that everything changed. They had been working in the tunnels beneath the structure, using flashlights to examine the foundation supports. The space was cramped, requiring them to work closely together, their shoulders brushing as they maneuvered around the massive concrete pillars. Hannah was ahead of her, flashlight beam dancing across the curved ceiling when she suddenly stopped and turned. In the confined space, they found themselves face to face, mere inches apart. The beam of Hannah's flashlight caught between them, creating a circle of warm light in the surrounding darkness. Leah, Hannah whispered, and something in her voice made Leah's breath catch. Time seemed suspended. Leah could feel Hannah's breath on her face, could see the question in her eyes. And in that moment, surrounded by the solid foundation of the bridge they were inspecting, Leah felt her own foundation shift. She had never kissed a woman, had never even considered it. But as Hannah's lips met hers, soft and warm and perfect, Leah realized that some truths don't need to be considered. They simply need to be experienced. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and when they finally broke apart, Leah felt as if she had been holding her breath for 42 years and was finally allowed to exhale. Quotes Leah started, then stopped, her mind reeling. Are you okay? Hannah asked, concern evident in her voice. Leah looked at her, really looked at her, in the flashlight's glow. This woman who had somehow become the most important part of her days, who made her laugh and think and feel more alive than she had in years. This woman whose simple presence made everything else fade into background noise. I think, Leah said slowly, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. But awakening, my dear listeners, is rarely a smooth process. It's more like a demolition of an old bridge. Sometimes you have to tear down what was there before you can build something new. The weeks following that kiss were a whirlwind of confusion and discovery for Leah. She found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about herself, about love, about desire. How could she have lived 42 years without understanding this fundamental truth about her own heart? She threw herself into research with the same methodical approach she used for bridge inspections. Late nights were spent reading articles, watching documentaries, trying to understand the terminology and experiences of a community she had somehow missed entirely. Am I having a midlife crisis? She asked her sister Karen during their weekly phone call. Is this just some reaction to the divorce? You're asking the wrong person, Karen replied with characteristic bluntness. But I will say this, I haven't heard you sound this excited about anything in years. Not even when you got that promotion. Hannah, for her part, was patient and understanding, never pushing, always giving Leah space to process her feelings. But Leah could see the uncertainty in her eyes sometimes, the fear that this was just an experiment that would end with Hannah's. Heartbroken, it was during one of their evening walks along the river that Leah finally voiced her deepest fear. What if this is just, I don't know, novelty? What if I'm just confused because everything else in my life has changed? Hannah stopped walking and turned to face her, the city lights reflecting in the water behind her like scattered stars. Leah, can I ask you something? Leah nodded. When you were married to David, when you were intimate with him, what did you think about? The question caught Leah off guard. She opened her mouth to give some generic answer, then closed it again. Because the truth was, she had usually thought about other things entirely. Work, grocery lists, anything to make her mind wander away from what was happening to her body. I see, Hannah said gently, reading the answer in Leah's silence. And when I kiss you? Heat flooded Leah's cheeks as she remembered. When Hannah kissed her, her mind went completely blank except for the overwhelming sensation of being present, being alive, being exactly where she wanted to be. That's not confusion, sweetheart, Hannah said softly. That's recognition. It was Hannah who suggested the psychological study. Dr. Sarah Winters, a researcher at the university, was conducting interviews with women who had come out later in life, and she was looking for participants. I think it might help you process all of this, Hannah explained as they sat in Leah's living room, surrounded by the boxes she still hadn't unpacked since the divorce. Sometimes talking to a professional can help us make sense of our own experiences. Leah was hesitant at first. The idea of discussing her personal life with a stranger felt invasive. But as the weeks passed and her internal turmoil continued, she found herself agreeing. Dr. Winter's office was warm and welcoming, filled with plants and soft lighting that immediately put Leah at ease. The psychologist herself was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a gentle manner that invited honesty. Tell me about your childhood, Dr. Winters began. Were there any signs that you might have been different from other girls your age? Leah thought back to her youth, the discomfort with traditionally feminine activities, her preference for her brother's friends over her own, the way she had always felt like she was performing a role rather than living authentically. I remember being 12 and watching other girls get excited about boys, Leah said slowly. I tried to feel the same way, but it was like trying to force myself to enjoy a food I didn't like. I assumed I was just a late bloomer. And when? Did you start dating men? In college? My roommate set me up with David during our sophomore year. He was nice, stable, everything I thought I should want in a partner. When he proposed after graduation, it seemed like the logical next step. The logical next step, Dr. Winters repeated. Not the exciting or romantic next step? Leah shook her head. I thought excitement and romance were things you saw in movies. Not real life. I thought mature love was supposed to be comfortable. As the sessions continued, patterns began to emerge. Leah recognized her tendency to intellectualize emotions rather than feel them. Her habit of choosing partners based on practical considerations rather than passion. Her lifelong sense of being slightly out of step with her peers. It's quite common, Dr. Winters explained during their fourth session, for women who don't recognize their sexuality until later in life to describe feeling like they were going through the motions. You were living according to a script that was written for someone else. But how could I not know? Leah asked, frustration evident in her voice. How could I be so oblivious to something so fundamental about myself? Society is very good at teaching us what we're supposed to want, Dr. Winters replied gently. And when we're surrounded by heteronormative expectations from birth, it can be difficult to even recognize alternatives. You weren't oblivious, Leah. You were doing what you thought you were supposed to do to survive and thrive in the world as you understood it. The breakthrough came during their sixth session when Dr. Winters asked Leah to describe her happiest memories. Without hesitation, Leah found herself talking about her friendship with Emma in high school, how they had spent hours together, how Leah had felt jealous when Emma started dating boys, how she had been devastated when Emma went to college across the country. I told myself I was just sad to lose my best friend, Leah said, then paused as the realization hit her. But it was more than that, wasn't it? I was in love with her. Dr. Winters smiled. What do you think? Leah closed her eyes, allowing herself to truly remember Emma for the first time in decades. The way her heart had raced when Emma smiled at her, the way she had memorized every detail of Emma's face, the way she had dreamed about them running away together, just the two of them against the world. I was 17 and in love with my best friend, Leah whispered, and I buried it so deep I convinced myself it never happened. Armed with this new understanding of herself, Leah began the delicate process of integration. She started reaching out to other women who had similar experiences, joining online support groups, reading memoirs that reflected her own journey. She was surprised to discover how common her story was, women who had lived perfectly adequate heterosexual lives, until they met someone who made them realize what they had been missing. It's like I've been seeing the world in black and white my entire life, She told Hannah one evening as they cooked dinner together in Hannah's kitchen. And now suddenly everything is in color. Hannah smiled as she stirred the pasta sauce. That's a beautiful way to put it. I keep waiting for it to feel strange or wrong, Leah continued, wrapping her arms around Hannah from behind, still marveling at how natural the gesture felt. But it doesn't. It feels like coming home. Hannah leaned back into her embrace. Maybe because it is. Their relationship deepened as Leah's self-acceptance grew. What had started as friendship and attraction evolved into something profound and sustaining. They discovered they were compatible in ways that went far beyond the physical. They shared similar values, complementary skills, and a deep respect for each other's independence and strength. Hannah's apartment became a sanctuary where Leah could explore this new version of herself without judgment. They spent weekends antiquing, trying new restaurants, attending events in the city's LGBTQ community. Slowly, Leah began to build a life that felt authentic rather than prescribed. The coming out process was gradual and mostly positive. Karen, her sister, claimed she had suspected for years but had been waiting for Leah to figure it out herself. Her parents, while initially confused, came around after meeting Hannah and seeing how happy their daughter had become. "You're glowing," her mother said during their first dinner together as a couple. "I haven't seen you smile this much since you were a child." The only real challenge came from David, who struggled to understand how their marriage had failed so completely without his realizing Leah's true nature. "Did you ever love me?" he asked during their final conversation, his voice heavy with hurt and confusion. Leah considered the question carefully. "I loved you the way I knew how to love at the time," she said honestly. "I cared about you, I respected you, I wanted good things for you. But I wasn't capable of the kind of love you deserved because I didn't understand myself well enough to give it. It wasn't the answer he wanted, but it was the truth." And for the first time in her life, Leah was committed to living truthfully, even when it was difficult. 2 years later, Leah stood once again beneath a bridge, not for an inspection this time, but for a ceremony. The old railway bridge where she and Hannah had shared their first kiss had been converted into a pedestrian walkway, and the city had agreed to let them hold their commitment ceremony there. The space was decorated with white flowers and string lights, transforming the industrial structure into something magical. Their friends and family gathered on the walkway above, while Leah and Hannah exchanged vows in the tunnel below, in the exact spot where everything had changed. "I promise," Leah said, her voice echoing off the curved walls, "to never again live a life that isn't mine. To honor the truth of who we are together, and to build something with you that will last." Hannah's response brought tears to everyone's eyes. "I promise to be patient with your journey, to celebrate every step of your becoming, and to love all the versions of yourself, the ones you've been, the one you are, and the ones you're still discovering." As they kissed to seal their commitment, surrounded by the solid foundation of the bridge that had brought them together, Leah marveled at the journey that had led her here. All those years of feeling like she was living someone else's life, and now, finally, she was home. But let me tell you, young one, awakening doesn't happen in isolation. Like a stone dropped into still water, Leah's transformation sent ripples through every corner of her existence, touching lives she never expected. It was 6 months after their commitment ceremony when Leah received the letter. The return address showed no name, just a post office box in a small town 3 states away. Inside, written in careful cursive on cream-colored stationery, were the words that would remind her why her story mattered beyond her own happiness. "Dear Leah, you don't know me, but I was at the conference where you spoke about late life self-discovery. I'm 63 years old, and I've been married to my husband for 41 years. We have 3 children and 7 grandchildren. By all appearances, I have lived a successful, fulfilling life. But listening to you speak about that moment in the tunnel, about the flashlight illuminating not just the bridge structure, but the truth of your own heart, something shifted inside me. I've carried a secret for 63 years, and knowing that I've pushed down so deep, I almost convinced myself it wasn't real. I wanted to thank you for your courage in sharing your story. And I wanted you to know that this weekend, for the first time in my life, I'm going to tell my husband the truth about who I am. I don't know what will happen next, but I know I can't spend whatever years I have left living as someone I'm not." With gratitude and hope, Margaret Leah sat at her kitchen table, tears streaming down her face as she read the letter again. "Hannah, Found her there an hour later, still clutching the paper like a sacred text. Another one? Hannah asked gently, sitting beside her. Leah nodded. In the months since she had begun speaking at conferences and support groups, sharing her story with others navigating similar journeys, the letters had been arriving regularly. Women in their 30s who had never questioned their sexuality until they met someone who changed everything. Women in their 50s realizing why their marriages had always felt performative rather than passionate. Women in their 70s finally giving themselves permission to love authentically. Sometimes I wonder, Leah said, folding Margaret's letter carefully, how many of us are out there? How many women have spent decades living lives that don't quite fit, thinking that's just how love is supposed to feel? Hannah took her hand. And sometimes I think about how many lives you've changed by being brave enough to tell your truth. It was David who surprised them most. 2 years after their divorce, he appeared at their door on a rainy Thursday evening, holding a bottle of wine and wearing an expression Leah had never seen during their marriage, something raw and vulnerable, and entirely real. I owe you an apology, he said without preamble when Leah opened the door. And a thank you. Hannah discreetly retreated to the kitchen while Leah and David sat in the living room, the weight of their shared history filling the space between them. I've been in therapy, David began, setting the unopened wine on the coffee table. Trying to understand what went wrong with us, trying to figure out why I felt so disconnected from everything for so long. Leah waited, sensing there was more. The thing is, he continued, his voice thick with emotion, watching you come alive. These past few years, seeing you become this vibrant, authentic person, it made me realize I was living just as much of a lie as you were. He paused, gathering courage for what came next. I met someone, Leah. His name is Marcus, and he's everything I never knew I was looking for. And I realized that all those years, I thought there was something wrong with our marriage. Something wrong with you or me or both of us, We were just two people trying to love each other in ways we weren't designed for. The revelation hung in the air between them, and Leah felt a piece of guilt she'd been carrying finally dissolve. They had both been performing versions of themselves, both trying to fit into molds that were never meant for them. I'm happy for you, she said, and meant it completely. I'm so glad you found your truth, too. David's eyes filled with tears. I need you to know what we had wasn't nothing. It was real, in its own way. We were two people doing the best we could with what we understood about ourselves at the time. We were, Leah agreed, and now we get to do better. When Hannah rejoined them later, the three of them sat around the table, sharing wine and stories, laughing about the strange twists life takes, marveling at the unexpected ways love finds us when we finally stop running from ourselves. You know, what's funny, David said as the evening wound down. I used to think there was something fundamentally broken about love, about relationships. But watching you two together, you make it look so easy. Hannah smiled. It's not easy, but it's honest. And that makes all the difference. 5 years into their relationship, Leah and Hannah made a decision that surprised everyone, including themselves. They decided to become foster parents. I know it's unconventional, Leah said to her sister during one of their weekly calls. Two middle-aged women who'd just figured out who they are, wanting to take in teenagers. But we have so much love to give and so much hard-won wisdom about becoming yourself. Their first placement was a 16-year-old girl named Riley, who had been bounced between homes after coming out as transgender to her conservative parents. She arrived at their door with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes and a wall of defensive anger that could have fortified a small city. Great, Riley muttered, looking around their warmly decorated living room. Another set of do-gooders who think they can fix me. Leah and Hannah exchanged glances. They recognized that anger, that protective shell built around a heart that had been hurt too many times. We're not here to fix you, Hannah said calmly. We're here to give you a safe place to fix yourself if that's what you want to do. It took 3 months for Riley to begin trusting them. 3 months of small gestures, Hannah learning to make the specific brand of hot chocolate Riley liked, Leah teaching her how to change the oil in a car, both of them fiercely advocating for her at school when other students gave her trouble. The breakthrough came on a Saturday morning when Riley found Leah in the garage, working on restoring an old motorcycle. Can I help? Riley asked, her usual armor of sarcasm notably absent. Sure, Leah said, handing her a wrench. I could use an extra pair of hands. They worked in comfortable silence for a while before Riley spoke again. My parents said I was going through a phase, that I was confused, that if I just tried harder to be the person they wanted me to be, I'd be happy. Leah paused in her work, understanding the weight behind those words. You know, she said carefully, I spent 40 years trying to be the person other people wanted me to be, and I was miserable. It wasn't until I finally admitted who I really was that I found any peace. Riley looked up from the carburetor she was cleaning. But weren't you scared? Of losing everything? Terrified, Leah admitted. But you know, what I learned? The people who truly love you will love the real you. And the ones who don't, well, maybe they weren't loving you anyway. Maybe they were loving the idea of who they thought you should be. That night, for the first time since arriving, Riley came down for dinner without being called. And the next morning, she asked if she could call Leah and Hannah Mom instead of their first names. Word of Leah and Hannah's success with Riley spread through the foster care system, and soon they found themselves specializing in LGBTQ+ youth who had been rejected by their families. Their home became a way station for young people learning to love themselves in a world that often seemed determined to teach them otherwise. There was James, 17 and gay, who had been living in his car after his family threw him out. Marcus, 15 and non-binary, whose depression had lifted dramatically once they found adults who used their chosen pronouns without question. Sophia, 16 and lesbian, who had never seen a healthy same-sex relationship until she moved in with them. You're creating a small revolution, Dr. Winters told Leah during one of their now infrequent sessions. These kids are learning that they can be authentically themselves and still be loved, still have families, still build meaningful lives. Leah thought about this as she sat in the bleachers watching Riley pitch in her high school softball game, Hannah beside her cheering loudly. 3 other foster kids scattered around them, all wearing matching t-shirts that read, Riley's Crew. This wasn't the family she had imagined when she was younger, but it was perfect in ways she never could have anticipated. Sometimes, she told Dr. Winters, I think my whole life before was just preparation for this. All those years of feeling lost, of not understanding myself. Maybe it was so I could help these kids find themselves faster than I did. And what do you think about that? Dr. Winters asked with a smile. I think, Leah said, that love multiplies in ways we can't predict. Every person who learns to love themselves authentically creates space for someone else to do the same. It was on their 7th anniversary, 7 years since that first kiss in the tunnel, that Leah received a phone call that brought her story full circle. Leah, this is Emma Patterson. Well, Emma Richardson now. I don't know if you remember me, but we were friends in high school. Leah's heart stopped. Emma, her first love, though she hadn't understood it at the time. The girl whose memory had unlocked so much truth during her therapy sessions. Emma, she breathed. Of course. I remember you. How did you find me? I saw an article about your work with foster kids, Emma said, her voice warm with affection. I've been following your story for a while now, actually. I wanted to reach out because your journey helped me understand something about my own life. They arranged to meet the following weekend, and when Emma walked into the coffee shop, where they had agreed to meet, Leah was amazed to see how little she had changed. The same bright eyes, the same infectious smile, though now framed by laugh lines and the kind of confidence that comes with age. You look happy, Emma said, embracing her warmly, truly, genuinely happy. I am, Leah replied. Finally, what about you? Emma's smile faltered slightly. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. I've been married for 20 years. 3 kids, good husband, successful career. Everything I thought I wanted. Leah waited, recognizing the familiar cadence of someone approaching a difficult truth. But reading about your story, about that moment when you finally understood who you were, it made me remember us. How I felt about you. How I felt about other women over the years, but convinced myself it was just friendship, just admiration. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. I think I've been in love with women my whole life, and I've been too scared to admit it, even to myself. They talked for 3 hours, Emma sharing her story while Leah listened with the patience of someone who had walked this path before. By the end of their conversation, Emma was crying, not from sadness, but from the relief of finally speaking her truth aloud. I don't know what I'm going to do, Emma said, wiping her eyes. I have responsibilities, people depending on me. You don't have to figure it all out today, Leah said gently. But you do have to decide whether you want to spend the rest of your life pretending to be someone you're not, or whether you want to start the hard, beautiful work of becoming who you really are. She handed Emma her business card. When you're ready to talk to someone who understands, call me. And if you ever need to see that authentic love is possible, come have dinner with us. Meet our kids. See what a real family looks like when it's built on truth instead of expectations.